Dashan Song rode up to Mr. M and said, "Sir, that's the main force of the Fox tribe. They've set up camp 20 miles northeast of here." He asked, "How many soldiers do they have?" Vance D spoke up and said, "It's too dark to see everything clearly, but their camp stretches wide. There must be at least 50,000 people." Mr. M fell into deep thought as he weighed the situation. He turned to Dashan Song and asked, "Do they have a lot of scouts out there?" Dashan Song nodded gravely and said, "Plenty of them. We ran into 4 scout groups on our way back." Mr. M said, "Then we'll use this chance to train our own scouts." Since it was the main force of the Fox tribe, he felt a strange sense of relief. Their main army wouldn't bother with a small outpost like Yinghe Fort. It held no strategic value for them, and attacking it would gain them nothing. Still, Mr. M had no plans to sit idle while the enemy lingered so close. Every enemy head counted as a true mark of honor. The winter night bit with a fierce chill. Even the scouts wrapped in thick leather armor shivered against the cold. Under the pale moonlight, the faint sound of hooves mixed with shadowy figures creeping forward. A sudden piercing scream shattered the stillness of the frosty night. Dark shapes clashed and darted under the cold moon's glow. War horses snorted, and weapons rang out with sharp clangs. Shouts of rage and cries of pain burst through the air. The chaos lasted only a few moments before silence returned. Dashan Song stood over a fallen body at his feet. This marked the 3rd Fox Scout group they'd taken down. Each Fox Scout team ranged from 5 to 10 riders, spread out to guard their camp's edges. Dashan Song and his men worked in small flag units, hunting these scouts under the cover of darkness. It was a deadly game played in the night's embrace. They were both the hunters and the hunted in this shadowy chase. Who'd claim the title of hunter in the end depended on strength and patience alone. When dawn's light broke, Dashan Song and his team rode back to Yinghe Fort. They carried several enemy heads as proof of their night's work. Mr. M had only just managed a short rest when Mr. 3rd D woke him. He made his way to the government office's study to hear the report. He asked, "How did the night go?" Dashan Song flashed a wide grin and said, "It went well. We brought back 132 heads." Mr. M's face stayed calm as he asked, "And what of our losses?" Dashan Song's smile faded as he answered, 13 of our men fell and 8 more took heavy wounds." Mr. M gave a quiet nod at the numbers. He knew the surprise attack on the Fox Scouts had given them the upper hand. He never underestimated the Fox tribe's strength, especially in open battle. In the Yinghe River fight the day before, they'd held every advantage. Yet with cavalry numbers so close, their own losses had still reached nearly half. A general's triumph often comes at the cost of countless lives. He turned to Dashan Song and said, "You and your men should go rest now." Dashan Song and his team hadn't slept in a full day and night. After he left, Mr. M thought for a moment and summoned Vance D and Mr. 2nd D to his side. He said, "Vance D, ride to Jianninggard and ask General Clerk if she has any orders for us." Then he turned to Mr. 2nd D and said, "Go to every garrison and Fire Road Pier and Beacon Tower. Gather 200 soldiers and bring them here at once." After the battle yesterday, only about 200 of his 300 cavalry could still fight. The 200 infantry had come through with little loss. As soon as Vance D and Mr. 2nd D set out, Mr. 3rd D hurried in with news. He said, "Father, Mr. Lopez wishes to speak with you." He said, "Please bring him to me." In truth, he didn't much care for the proud and rigid old man. Though the old man was an exiled prisoner now, many fallen officials in Durong had risen again. The Lopez family had weathered 3 falls and 3 recoveries. If he were restored again, he'd be a powerful figure in the court once more. Pablo Lopez said, "I've come to ask if there's anything I can do to assist you." Mr. M stood there, caught off guard by the offer. He hadn't expected Pablo Lopez to step forward with help, but then he wondered what the old man could possibly do. He said, "I'd be grateful if you could help oversee the government office for me." Pablo Lopez frowned and said, "What's so important about watching over the government office?" He genuinely wanted to lend a hand. Before this, he hadn't thought poorly of Mr. M, but he'd kept his distance from military officers like him. As a civil official, he knew it was risky to mix too closely with the military. This was especially true for someone like him who'd once held high rank in the court. Yet over these past months, Mr. M's actions had earned his respect. He saw that Mr. M was a capable and dedicated leader. The Fox tribe's invasion had also pushed him to set aside his reservations. That's why he'd come to offer his help. Even if he wasn't sure how to contribute, Mr. M looked at him and said, "I'm heading to Linguan Fort soon. I'd like you to take charge of Yinghe Fort while I'm gone." Whether Pablo Lopez was a figurehead or a true asset, Mr. M decided to put him in place for now. Pablo Lopez raised his eyes to Mr. M and said, "Very well. Bring your people here so I can meet them. Mr. M had no objections and called for Winston Lane and Hugo Lane and Old Lee to join them. The government office had over a dozen clerks, but these three were the key figures. Mr. M said, "Once I leave, you must follow the old gentleman's directions." He added, "Old gentleman, I'll leave Mr. Second D here to handle the fort's defenses. If you have any orders, you can go to him." That afternoon, Vance D returned from Jianning with Lucy Clerk's orders. It wasn't a specific task. A defense officer's main duty was to protect the garrisons under his command. Even if Lucy Clerk led her forces into battle, she wouldn't call on garrison troops. Around dusk, Mr. Second D returned with 200 infantrymen in tow. Tomorrow, Mr. M would lead all these men to Lingwan Fort. Lingwan Fort was smaller than Yinghe Fort and far less stocked with supplies. This journey to Lingwan Fort demanded thorough preparation. The task of gathering supplies fell to Pablo Lopez. The old man proved himself capable and full of energy. After breakfast, Mr. M led 200 cavalry and 300 infantry out of Yinghe Fort. He brought Theo Ding, the D family guard, along with him. One must never intend harm, but always be ready to guard against it. In all of Yinghe Fort, no one surpassed Theo Ding's strength except Mr. M himself. Though Theo Ding was now his servant, Mr. M couldn't assume he'd risk everything for the D family. It was safer to keep him close on this journey. By noon, they reached Lingwan Fort. Mr. M sent Vance D and Dashan Song out with scouts to survey the surroundings. Just a day after Mr. M and his men settled in Lingwan Fort, the Fox Army reached Heavy Mountain Pass City. High on the city walls, a few cloaked figures stood watching the Fox Army draw near. At that moment, a striking man in a snow-white fox fur stepped onto the city wall. Titus Lewis frowned slightly and said, "Eunuch Larkin, why aren't you in the city? What brings you here?" Eunuch Larkin's face stayed calm as he replied, "The enemy stands at our gates. As the military supervisor, I must come see for myself." Titus Lewis's expression darkened at the words, "military supervisor." No one welcomed a meddling overseer, especially not a eunuch like this. Eunuch Larkin had risen from the secret guard. Others might fear the secret guard, but Titus Lewis, the Changping Marquis, did not. What was the secret guard to him? His Changping Marquis mansion traced its line back to the days of Taizu's conquests. Durong's history spanned 300 years. The Changping Marquis mansion stood as the only noble house to endure all 300 of those years. The Ning mansion, Duke and Chang mansion Duke were mere century-old nobles by comparison. He said, "Watch if you must, but do not meddle in how I lead this battle." Titus Lewis curled his lip and turned away, unwilling to bother with the eunuch any longer. The secret guard's name carried a dark shadow in the capital. Civil officials, military leaders, and noble families alike shunned them. Few dared to cross paths with their kind. Duncan Livingston, meanwhile, had no taste for dealing with the secret guard or entangling himself with eunuchs. Since Eunuch Larkin's arrival, he'd kept his gaze fixed on the distant Fox Army in silence. The three stood atop the city wall for a long stretch without a word. Finally, Duncan Livingston broke the quiet. He asked, "When does the Marquis plan to strike?" Titus Lewis replied, "We'll wait a bit longer until their guard slips." Duncan Livingston nodded and said, "Then I wish the Marquis a mighty victory." With that, he turned and headed back inside the city. After he left, Eunuch Larkin spoke up. He said, "I've uncovered that some in Jing'an Prefecture are working with the enemy and betraying the land." Titus Lewis's eyes narrowed as he asked, "Who?" Eunuch Larkin's voice cut like the icy wind as he answered, "The Jing'an Lewis family. Over the past 10 years, they've smuggled vast amounts of salt, iron, and grain beyond the pass." Titus Lewis asked, "The Jing'an Lewis family, are they nobles or a wealthy clan?" He'd never heard of them before. Eunuch Larkin said simply, "Merchants." Titus Lewis let out a scornful laugh and said, "Merchants!" He added, "You've only found one merchant family?" Eunuch Larkin caught the mockery in his tone. Treason through collaboration with the enemy stunned Titus Lewis. How could mere merchants muster the guts to commit such an act? There had to be greater powers pulling the strings behind them. Titus Lewis had his suspicions, but no solid proof had surfaced. The secret guard could strike first and report later, but that didn't mean they could act without restraint. When dealing with deep-rooted forces, they needed evidence before they could act. Worse still, this matter might even touch the royal family itself. Without backing from Heavy Mountain Town's highest ranks, it couldn't be done. Dean Taylor had once been the eunuch overseeing Heavy Mountain Town. Sun Shincheng had served as its former governor. Both stood as prime suspects in this betrayal. As for the former General Dingyuan Marcus Samuel Taylor, if he'd been involved, he wouldn't have returned to the capital unharmed. Eunuch Larkin said, "I'll need the Marquis to replace the garrison commander at Anyuan City." He asked, Are you saying they moved supplies through Anyuan City? Eunuch Larkin nodded and said, Yes, they did. Titus Lewis asked, The garrison commander there is Cao Han. Is he part of this too? Eunuch Larkin confirmed, He is. Titus Lewis frowned and asked, What about Brain Van? Brain Van commanded Songguard east of Heavy Mountain Town. He was Cao Han's direct superior. Eunuch Larkin replied, We've found no evidence against him yet. If Brain Van hadn't been implicated, he was likely clean. From Eunuch Larkin's tone, the replacement couldn't be just anyone. Titus Lewis understood the goal. The new commander would either flush out the traitors or stir the waters to reveal more. He'd need to choose carefully. The replacement had to be capable and strong. They couldn't have deep ties to Heavy Mountain Town's former leaders. And their transfer to Anyuan City needed a believable reason. Titus Lewis asked, When does this replacement need to happen? Eunuch Larkin replied, There's no rush. I need time to prepare as well. Titus Lewis nodded at that. If time wasn't pressing, the task became much easier. He could take his time to find the right person. For now, the most pressing matter was driving back the invading Fox army. Eunuch Larkin cast a final glance at the Fox army below the city walls. His cold eyes showed no hint of emotion. He said, I too wish the Marquise a grand victory. With that, he turned and walked away from the wall. It was February 15th in the 25th year of the Changping. On a mountain peak west of Lingguan Fort, the air felt heavy. A biting wind howled through the peaks. The dark sky loomed overhead like a slab of lead pressing down. Mr. M stood wrapped in a thick cloak, gazing at the Fox tribe's camp to the north. The Fox army had been settled below Heavy Mountain Pass for several days now. If all went as expected, they'd make their move within the next 2 days. Vance D stood beside him and looked up at the heavy clouds. He said, My lord, it looks like snow is coming. Snow would force the Fox tribe to halt their plans. Mr. M studied the sky for a moment, then shook his head and said, There will be no snow. His sense of the weather had grown sharper with time. He could almost perfectly predict changes within 3 days. He even had a faint sense of the weather patterns for the coming year. He said, Let's head back. Together, they made their way down and returned to Lingguan Fort. The fort buzzed with activity and felt packed to its limits. Temporary tents crowded the training ground. Tristan D approached Mr. M and said, Sir, here's the report on our food and supplies. Mr. M stepped into the study and settled by the warm stove. He opened the document and scanned it quickly. He said, This should last us a month. Tristan D added, Also, the young and strong men you asked me to gather are ready. Mr. M asked, How many did you find? Tristan D replied, 123 in total. Mr. M nodded and said, Good, get them ready. If the Fox tribe attacks, they'll need to help us defend the fort. Since arriving at Lingguan Fort, Mr. M had prepared for the worst. If the Fox tribe struck, it wouldn't be with a mere 300 or 500 soldiers. They'd come with thousands, perhaps even tens of thousands. In the days that followed, the Fox tribe sent more and more scouts to probe the area. Mr. M dispatched his own scouts as well, but kept them within 3 miles of Lingguan Fort. He couldn't afford to lose the 200 cavalry under his command. To avoid heavy losses, he ordered them to retreat to the fort at once if they spotted Fox cavalry. As Mr. M weighed the chances of an attack, a sudden clang of gongs rang out. There was no need to guess. The Fox tribe had come. Mr. M strode out of the study and nearly collided with Tristan D. Tristan D said, Sir, the Fox bandits are here. There are more than 1,000 of them. Mr. M said, Pass the order. Prepare to defend the fort. He hurried toward the tower at the back of the garrison. From the tower's height, he saw a cloud of dust rising in the north. After days of waiting, the enemy had finally arrived. This would be a true and brutal fight. No one could say whether they'd live or die. The soldiers of Lingguan Fort carried an extra burden to protect. They'd survived the Fox cavalry's massacres in the past. They'd finally found a home where they could live in peace. They'd never let anyone shatter that or harm their families again. Mr. M stood atop the tower and studied the approaching Fox army. It was a mixed force of infantry and cavalry, numbering about 1,500. At the front, small teams of Fox cavalry had already reached Lingguan Fort. They rode in circles around the fort, stopping now and then to shout. One called out, Listen up, Darong dogs inside. If you know what's best, you'll come out and surrender. Another yelled, Cowardly Darong people. Our masters have made it clear. Surrender and you'll live. Your families will be spared. The Fox cavalry shouted, Those who surrender will not be killed and their families will be spared. Their cries echoed into the garrison but stirred no reaction. The soldiers stood firm as if they hadn't heard a word. Their eyes stayed locked on the Fox riders circling outside. Surrender was no option for them. The military households in the garrison had all suffered at the hands of the Fox people. A deep blood feud burned in their hearts. The soldiers Mr. M had brought had their own reasons to stand firm. Their families weren't here, but surrender would doom their loved ones to punishment. Their entire households would face death for such a betrayal. Most around them held no thoughts of giving in. Even the few who might fear death kept silent. They wouldn't dare voice such a thought. About half an hour later, the Fox army reached the outskirts of Lingwan Fort. They gathered slowly, 1 mile north of the garrison. From a distance, the 1,500 enemy troops looked like a dark, menacing mass. Even Mr. M felt the weight of facing so many foes for the first time. Tristan D. leaned in and asked quietly, "Sir, should we light the beacon?" Lighting the beacon would send a signal to the battlement. But Mr. M knew the battlement wouldn't spare a thought for Lingwan Fort right now. He wasn't sure what plan Titus Lewis, the Changping Marquis, had in mind. Yet he was certain Titus Lewis wouldn't alter his strategy for a single garrison. Mr. M thought it over and said, "Light the beacon." Whether Heavy Mountain Pass would send help or not didn't matter. He needed to ensure they knew what was happening here. Soon, 2 columns of beacon smoke rose from the tower in the garrison.